Hello, fellow builders. My name is Faya Lang. I'm going to help curate the main room today since Reichardt is needed all over the conference. And next up, we have a gentleman named Reid Mihalko. Reid is actually a relationship expert and sex geek. He is curating the boiler room for this conference. And a little bit about him. Once a teenage comic book artist. I wonder what led him into sex experting. And also virgin captain of the football team. He found his way into sex and relationships watching his parents' marriage and how that got fucked up, and decided that he wanted to figure out how he could make other relationships work in the future. So we've got Reid Mihalko on dating your species. Everyone, a warm welcome, please.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. God, they've got me taped down, so I can't walk around. Good morning. Good morning. All right, I'm a big one about making noise because a lot of people don't, use their voices when they're in the bedroom. The main reason, I think, is because for those of us who started self-exploring ourselves, intimacy, eroticness when we were little kids or older, it wasn't like your parents told you, Billy, we know you're playing with yourself. You need to be a little louder. Yeah, we can't, your father and I can't hear you. So everyone take a deep breath and just go, oh. Thank you, builders. Now let's just do that one more time, but give me a creepy sigh, like kind of sexual creepy. Inhale. We can do better than that, but we'll try that later. So for those of you live tweeting, if you have cell phone service down here, BIL2012 is the hashtag for Bill. How many people have ever heard of cuddle parties? An intimacy and communication workshop started in 2004. I was the person that helped launch that, and it got me on Montel and Tyra. And that was a communication workshop about non-sexual affection and how you create safe space for yourself and then invite other people into that safe space, which is really kind of a quick recipe for intimacy. And I'll talk a little bit about how that applies to us in a minute. I teach all over the country. Readaboutsex.com is my website if you want to go check it out. So now I'm a professional sex geek, and I have things to tell you about relationships. And this whole idea, this talk of mine, date your species, I think is really interesting. Raise your hand if you've ever had trouble with relationships. Okay, all right, we're not alone. Well, there's some things you should know. It is my belief that in the last 2 to 3 generations, since our great-grandparents, relationships have changed a lot. The reasons that we stay together have actually shifted, and I don't think Oprah and the mainstream, self-help gurus are really talking about this. And so it's kind of like, there's slack in the bicycle chain, and the way to keep the relationship going is to pedal harder, but it keeps skipping, which is damn frustrating. It used to be the standard narrative around relationships was that if you married somebody or were arranged with somebody who was a good person, who didn't drink too much, who didn't squander the family fortune, didn't embarrass you at PTA meetings, people like this, if you didn't marry somebody like that, then you were lucky, and you should count yourself lucky. Because relationships back then weren't necessarily about love and happiness. But nowadays they are. So if you married somebody who didn't drink too much or didn't beat you, you were lucky. And if you had kids that grew up to be healthy and you got to watch them have your grandchildren, and you guys were still together at the end of all of it, you made it through some hard times, you gave your kids hopefully a better future than you had, and you gave your grandkids a better future than you had, and you were still together at the end of it all, you won. Like, you won the game of life. And you could die happy. You found somebody, you had kids, you stayed together, you wanted life. That narrative's changed now. There are a lot of reasons why you don't have to stay together anymore. It used to be that if you got divorced, you were shunned by your community. It used to be, as a woman in culture, you needed to marry somebody for security reasons, you know, because, and even for men, you know, a bachelor was, you know, okay, they're a bachelor. They're just like that. But if you were a single woman who never got married, there was a lot of mores in culture that were stacked against you to be self-expressed. So you had to marry and hopefully win at this narrative. But that's not the case anymore. You can be divorced now. You can have children on your own now. We have in our narrative in culture these days, we know as many people who grew up in divorced families that are completely healthy and well-adjusted. And maybe you know these people, maybe you are some of these people. And we also know people who stayed in the, you know, the family stayed married for the kids and it totally fucked them up. And I swear every once in a while, so I apologize. So now, this narrative, all the kids and the grandkids and the cousins and whatnot is changing because people are moving away. People aren't in arranged marriages so much anymore. And how we measure success has changed. Now, when somebody says you can grow up and be president, almost anything's possible. And if you're not in a relationship that makes you happy, why are you guys still together? Whereas 50 years ago, you stayed together anyway. So with this new narrative, with happiness and love being a part of the equation, and that it's perfectly okay to leave each other if you're not happy, which 50 years ago, 60 years ago, you stayed together and you just grinned and bared it. Now what do? I have some ideas. First off, you should understand a little bit about love. There's some MRI studies that are very interesting where they basically took people who were deeply in love and they just kind of scanned their brain. Let's just see, you know, what's the brain activity like? And what they found out were the centers of the brain that were active, this was a study done at Rutgers, the centers of the brain that were active are the exact same centers of the brain that are active when you're addicted to cocaine. So when you're in love, you're in brain love, baby, yeah. Basically what's happening is you're crazy. You are addicted. This is why you might have friends who meet somebody at a conference, and then next week they're like, I'm moving in with them. And you're like, wow, I thought you were a rationalist. They're like, no, Bill changed my life. But hopefully not like this. Okay? So know that when you are in love, you might not make the best rational decisions. Other things to know. I think the metrics for how we measure success in relationships should change. It used to be duration. The way you measured success was how long did you guys stay together. They've stopped making, for the most part, 75-year anniversary cards. It's not because people aren't living long enough to stay married for 75 years. It's just that most people aren't staying married for that long. The old paradigm would be like, that's failure. You guys broke up. Oh my God, the relationship was a failure. What I think now we should be using is depth, not duration, which if you think about it does sound a little dirty. But the idea of how deep and vulnerable and transparent is your relationship going. If you guys decide to transition the relationship and it comes from a place of, you know, wow, we really figured that after we raised the kids, we shouldn't stay together. Or we met at BIL and I moved in and then 2 months later we decided that this is probably not the best, smartest move. I think measuring depth rather than duration should be one of the new metrics we should be talking about in our relationships. Another thing I think is really important, it's about dating your species, is being the ability to tell the truth even if it will end the relationship. This idea that, you know, don't speak up, don't rock the boat, which worked really well in the 50s, but it didn't make people happy, I don't think. This idea that if you can have the conversations that you think will end the relationship, and the relationship doesn't end, I think you're actually having a relationship now, with a capital R. That kind of transparency and vulnerability, if you guys decide to stay together, that is what's going to, in the long run, I think, make you a happier person. So part of this dating your species idea is having those muscles to be that honest with people, to communicate that openly to the people that you're in love with, what makes you happy, what you want in your life around sex and relationships, and not hold that stuff back. When you start having those conversations, you will start, or even just thinking about it yourself and getting ready to have those conversations. When you start doing that, you're starting to define what your species is. What kind of sex makes you happiest? What kind of living arrangement makes you happiest? Even if you don't know, what do you think? And then maybe you go out and explore it, and you're like, wow, that was the wrong thing. I should never do that. Other ways to figure out what your species is. There's a great book by Gary Chapman called The 5 Love Languages. I recommend it to everybody I talk to. Okay, the quickie on the 5 love languages is that you have basic ways of showing that you care and basic ways of feeling cared for, feeling loved. Quality time, there's touch, there's gifts, words of affirmation. What is it? Acts of service. Thank you. And that you will have one or two that you show that you care about people with, just as your default. And you'll have one or two that make you feel really loved. Where this is really useful is if you are partnered with somebody who has different love languages than you, they could be showing you that they really care, and it's not landing on you at all like they care. So pick up this book, read it, and start to figure out what are your main love languages for giving and receiving. And then if you really want to front load the process, scout out the people you want to date for if they have compatible love languages. It just makes your relationship easier. The idea around relationships is that relationships are always going to be work from time to time. But when you start a relationship with somebody who's not your species, and you fall in love, then when it starts to wear off, that brain chemistry starts to wear off, you start to get angry and resentful because they're not a good match for you. The idea of relationships being effort, that you will, like a car driving up a hill, it's just hard work. The engine has to work harder. But a lot of people, when you're not dating people that match you in good ways, it's like you're driving up a hill with the parking brake on. There's extra effort happening in your relationship that doesn't need to be there. So these are just a couple of basic things to start looking at as to why relationships might be harder for you and why people keep ending and why you feel like a failure. Change your metrics, consider that. Start breaking down what it is that makes you happiest in relationships and start talking to people about those things, the scary stuff. And if they stick around and you guys are a good match, if they're your species, then your relationship, no matter if it lasts 2 weeks or 20 years, might make you more happy. So date your species. Thank you. And come to the Masque sex-positive boiler room in the back.
Everyone, another welcome for Reid. Thank you so much. Excellent job. I really wish I had met you before my ex-husband. Lang is the ex-husband's last name. I've decided to keep it. Looks better on headshots.